Welcome to Nolly Recaps. Today I will show you a love film titled Fine Wine. Fine Wine is a feel-good romantic movie directed by Seyi Babatope, a well-known Nigerian-American filmmaker. The movie begins with a birthday celebration of Mr. George, a successful businessman with several honors to his name, and has just emerged as the 100 most influential men in Africa. His children, Sammy and Timmy, though absent, also celebrates their dad via video call, which ended quickly as they had other things to attend to. Tunji is a senior banker executive who is dating Kaime, a serving youth corper in his bank. Tunji hardly gives Kaime attention. Kaime feels sad when Tunji didn't acknowledge her new hair. Mr. George is home alone after his birthday celebration. Obviously bored, he succumbs to the sarcastic and demeaning conversation with his ex-wife Ami via video call. Ami is the mother of his 2 children, who left him 15 years ago for a rich guy. She complains that their children hardly pick her calls nor want to speak with her, and blames him for the cold treatment towards her. Being the gentleman, he calmly excused himself to avoid further ranting. Kaime is at the door. Her mom beckons Kamsi, her younger sister, to get the door. Soon Kamsi's boyfriend Andrew shows up. Apparently they are going on a date and her mother encourages her to spend the night. Kaime is bewildered and objects to Kamsi spending the night at a man's place, but their mother insists Andrew is not just a guy, clearly in support of Kamsi. If you had slept over at Tunji's place, you would have secured your place and maybe he would have proposed to you, her mum retorted. Kaime maintained her resolve of securing her job at the bank more important than getting an engagement from Tunji. Mr. George is out with his best friend, Akin. He laments on the frustrating calls from Ami, his ex-wife. Akin reprimands him for always picking her calls and engaging in conversations with her. He encourages him to move on with his life. Mr. George insists he has tried but has been unlucky with his last 2 relationships. Akin then advised him to have females around that would meet his needs. Mr. George in humor declined the advice, insisting that he takes care of his need quite well. Kaime is busy, trying to select the best outfit for her date with Tunji. Her friend D'Angela is not comfortable with Tunji, but Kaime keeps making excuses for him, and in fact sees this date as a makeup for being too distracted to notice or compliment her newly made hair the other day. Kaime calls to remind Tunji of their date and her pickup, but to her disappointment and to the surprise of her friend, Tunji gives excuses about work and rather asked her to take a taxi. On getting to the venue, another disappointment surfaced. Tunji did not make reservations for them. Kaime quickly calls Tunji, displeased by his action. Tunji apologizes and gives her a name to check in with. Kaime goes back to the attendant with a different name that got her seated comfortably. Soon, an elderly nice-looking gentleman made his way and sat opposite her with a deep smile and a little apology for keeping her waiting. Kaime, upset and full of hurt, unleashed her anger on this stranger, telling him he was mistaken her for someone else and she doesn't find that funny. She advises him to vacate the sit before she comes back from the bathroom because the person she is waiting for will not be happy seeing him. Surprised and a little embarrassed, Mr. George turned to the attendant, who rushed to him with loads of apologies, stating that the lady mentioned his name, and so it was assumed she was waiting for him. There was apparently a mix-up somewhere. Anyways, he got him seated on another space. Minutes later, Tunji walks in with apologies and moves towards Mr. George, the same gentleman Kaime had challenged earlier. Apparently, Tunji chose this place because he had to meet Mr. George to sign up on some loan from the bank. Kaime was absolutely embarrassed and could hardly lift her eyes to face him, having realized who he was. Outside at the car park, Kaima told Tunji about the altercation between her and Mr. George earlier. Tunji was displeased. He insists Kaima finds a way to apologize and make things right with Mr. George. The next day, Kaima finds her way to Mr. George's office with a bottle of wine to apologize, but his secretary would not grant her access because she didn't schedule for an appointment. All pleas fell on the adamant ears of the secretary. Luckily for her, Mr. George steps in. On his way to lunch, she interrupts him and relays her intentions to apologize. He invites her to lunch with him as the only way for him to accept her apologies. At lunch, she apologized for being rude and presented the bottle of wine as a token. He accepts her apologies and engages her in conversations. She told him how she enjoys the banking sector and desires to be retained after her service year, which is due in 2 weeks' time, although she thinks it is almost impossible. He told her she should keep her hopes high because miracles do happen. He's obviously smitten by her presence. She thanked him and excused herself to go back to work. Back at the office, Tunji calls Kaima in a rather condescending manner. She's not pleased with the way he treats her in public, but he insists he's just trying to avert any form of suspicion of their relationship in public. Kaima understands but pleads to be treated with more respect. Kaima told him about the meeting with Mr. George, and Tunji was relieved that the apology was accepted. Back at home, Mr. George is pleased to see his daughter. They were supposed to spend the evening together and was looking forward to it, but he is disappointed to hear she had other pressing engagement for the night. The next day, there is celebration in the house as Kaima works in with a letter that says she has been retained at the bank. Her mother and sister danced and sang along. She doesn't know who the guardian angel behind her success was. Clearly not Tunji, because he himself is surprised. When Kaima finds that Mr. George is the guardian angel behind her being retained at the bank, she meets him to express her gratitude. It's obvious that he is smitten by her. He gives her his complimentary card and tells him to reach out if she has any need whatsoever. Mr. George is spending time with his good friend Aken. He tells him about Kaima and even admit how he feels about her, voicing his concerns for her age, being very young. Back at the bank, Tunji is summoned by the bank manager regarding the document he took to Mr. George to sign. Apparently, Tunj wrote 20 million naira on the document that Mr. George, instead of 200 million naira. The manager made it clear that Tunji had until 9 a.m. the following morning to resolve it or lose his job. Tunji calls Kaima's attention to his dilemma and pleaded to be bailed out. Kaima was hesitant, but Tunji was able to cajole her to take the blame and ask Mr. George to sign another document with the appropriate figures on it. Kaima goes to the office and was met with the adamant secretary, who mercilessly refused her access to Mr. George, stating clearly that he wasn't in. Kaima remembered the complimentary card and reached out to Hall. Later, she meets him at home. He was down with the flu. She sympathizes with him as he signs the documents. The chef comes in to inform him his food is ready, but he declines with an excuse of not having appetite. Kaima jumps in to offer her mother's pepper soup recipe. Mr. George liked the idea, but the chef had concerns and outrightly reminded him that he hardly knows anything about her. He resolved the concerns by asking Kaima to come prepare the pepper soup under watch of the chef. The next day, Kaima comes over to prepare the pepper soup. She wakes him up to eat when the food was ready. Temi, his daughter, walks in to find him dinning on the pepper soup. Kaima came in and Mr. George introduces them. Temi was welcoming but curious about Kaima. Temi wasted no time to ask for some bowl of pepper soup after tasting her father's portion. Temi encourages her dad's relationship with Kaima. She says he deserves to be happy. Akin came over to check on Mr. George's health. Akin teases Mr. George that he doesn't believe a girl can come over and cook for him without anything happening. They both laughed it over. Angela is pregnant and Kaima is super excited. Kaima reveals she's having feelings for Mr. George. Angela is excited about the news. Kaima comes to check on Mr. George. He looks much better and insists that Kaima calls him she, as Mr. George sounds formal. Mr. George offers to cook for her. They spend the evening together enjoying the taste of excellent wine. They toast to fine wine, to us, and friendship. Temi walks in and was intrigued to the news of her father cooking for Kaima. A lot of changes and sparkles in the evening atmosphere. Temi invites the two to the club for her client's special event. At the event, Akin is taken by Kaima's beauty, sweetness, and aura. Mr. George jealously protects Kaima from Akin and all other admirers. While at the event, a waiter mistakenly spills drink on Kaima's dress. This incurred the wrath of Mr. George. He was more furious than expected. He sends Temi and Kaima on a shopping hunt with direct orders to lavish Kaima with all that she needs. At the boutique, Temi searches for her phone but can't find it. She uses Kaima's phone to ring it and found it in her father's possession. She decided to do something before handing Kaima her phone. She changed her father's name on Kaima's phone from Mr. George to she. They came back at the lounge and Kaima was looking astoundingly beautiful. Mr. George was consumed with affection that he paid no attention to his friend Akin until Akin humbly excused the lovebirds. Back home, Kaima expresses her feelings for Mr. George with her sister. She told her how Mr. George treats her like a lady, takes good care of her and listens to her. Something Tunji doesn't do. She feels as if Tunji doesn't even see her. Kamzi is happy for her but reminds her that she must make a choice between Tunji or Mr. George instead of leading them both. Back at the bank, Tunji expresses how much he misses Kaima, but soon the sweet conversation ends when Kaima's phone rings and the caller is she. Tunji wonders why Mr. George's name is saved as she and demands for an explanation. They met in the file room and Kaima vividly explains to him what transpired at the boutique, but Tunji didn't believe her. Instead, he throws hurtful words at her. Kaima left the room terribly hurt. As days went by, Mr. George and Kaima made calls, enjoying each other's company. Tunji is at it again, ignoring Kaima while she's trying to have a conversation about her birthday. Apparently, he doesn't remember what date is Saturday, nor does he have plans for them. However, Mr. George takes Kaima on a birthday cruise on a yacht. It was an awesome and breathtaking experience for her. She asked her what she wanted for her birthday, but she insisted that the outing was just enough. They shared a kiss when he dropped her off at home. She thanked him and went in. Surprise! Screamed everyone as Kaima walked into the house. Everyone was there. Tunji hadn't forgotten after all. He had planned a surprise birthday party for her. Tunji went on one knee to propose to Kaima. Everyone screamed, "Say yes, yes, yes," and of course she said yes, and the ring slides into her finger. The next day at the office, Kaima stares at the ring on her finger, not sure about her feelings. Not long had she left the bathroom did she meet a furious Tunji, who dragged her abruptly into the file room, demanding an explanation to the pictures of her and Mr. George on a yacht. He was clearly furious that Kaima had lied to him. She tried to explain, but had little to say. Tunji wasted no time in calling her a lie, cheat, and a slut, accusing her of having sexual affairs with Mr. George. Kaima, more confused, nursed her pain. Kaima's mom sent for Tunji to apologize for her daughter's behavior. Kaima, having survived the irritating meeting and the tongue lashing from her mom and Tunji, was met with an unknown caller. It was Sei's ex-wife Ami. Sei and Akin are having a conversation when Ami called. Akin didn't want Sei to pick up. Ami is at it again with her nagging. But to her greatest surprise, Sei puts her in her place when she said she called Kaima and threatened her to stay away from him. To the amusement of Akin, Mr. George warned Ami never to call Kaima or him again. Access to him will be through his secretary henceforth. Kaima is on a date with Tunji, Angela, and her fiancé. Tunji is at it again with his sarcastic and demeaning utterances. But this time, Kaima has had enough of his bullshits. For the first time, she speaks her mind. Admitting she crossed the line with Mr. George and she's sorry, but at the same time she'd rather be with a man that knows how to respect and treat a lady properly. Yes, she will rather be with a 55-year-old. Well, if he would have her, she added, then be with him, she bloated. Angela makes a video of the scene, quite impressed with her friend's courage to face her fears. Kaima took off the engagement ring and set herself free from the shackles of Tunji's insecurity and ugly personality. Back home, Kaima related to Kamzi, her sister, what had happened, and to her surprise, her sister revealed that she had planned the whole surprise birthday party and not Tunji. He had completely forgotten about Kaima's birthday. The engagement was in fact an afterthought, more of a last-minute idea, to keep Kaima away from Mr. George, and not because he truly loved or cared about her. Kaima was irritated by the truth. Kamzi told her that their mum will sure be angry. She also revealed how proud she was of her and wished she had the courage to end things long ago with her boyfriend Andrew, but she was afraid, and also dreaded their mum's reactions. Kaima assured her that their mum will be fine eventually. Temi shows a video to her dad on her phone. Mr. George watched to his surprise. Knowing exactly what to do, outside at the gate, Kaima and her friend Angela were chatting and laughing when a white Range Rover drove in. Mr. George stepped out of the car to meet his beloved Kaima. Temi pops out her head to say they saw the video and heard all she said. Angela confessed to taking the video and sending it to Temi. She apologizes for all the pain, and also did Kaima. Kaima asked Mr. George to ask her what she wanted for her birthday again. What would you like for your birthday, he asked. You, she replied, mesmerized. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notification so you can watch more videos like this.